Hi, look at this picture. Can you see what's wrong with this string job? If you know the answer, you should also know why the strings appeared so crooked. But if you want to learn how to eliminate this from happening, check out my video Optimum Tensioning of Cross Strings. Now since these strings are so crooked and out of place, I'll share with you how to make them look like this. Alright, so before we get into the actual technique of straightening your strings, the tool that you'll need is called a setting off awl. But sometimes it's referred to as a straightening awl or a blunt awl because you'll notice that on the tip it's very blunt and it's very thick. These two are straight, you notice at the tip, one is shorter than the other. And I have a third one here that has a tapered tip. You'll notice it comes out narrow there. This one is very light, which I don't like, and I prefer to use this Babolat one that I've been using for over 25 years. But any of these will work as a tool for this technique. So here's a racket again that I had in the picture, but I have the clamps here as if I just finished stringing the racket. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and release them. And I like to get them out of the way so it's out of the string bed area. Now typically when you straighten out the mains, there's not a lot of straightening to do, but if there is, it's going to go inwards. So what you want to do is pull the string outwards. And I prefer to just use my fingers. The good thing is there's no wrong way to straighten strings, but there's just better ways to do it. So it's just my preference. There's some stringers that I'll see them using their awl, which is fine. So I'll just do it this way. The other thing is in this hybrid setup, I have softer mains, which is a multi-filament with the polyester cross. So whenever you're sliding or straightening a softer string, it is definitely going to be easier to move. So when I get into the straightening of the crosses, it'll be a little bit more challenging, but I'll be using the setting off awl for that. Remember this picture of the crooked strings? Well, you'll notice the top are straight and the bottom are crooked. So what I did on the top few crosses is I strung them how I would normally do it, where I keep the string straight right after I weaved it right there. And then after I weave the string through, I am going to tension the string, but also make sure that I hold it in place so it stays in a straight line. So on this next clip, on the bottom crosses, what I did is I just left the string however it ended up after I weaved through it. And I even pulled tension without holding it in a straight line. So that's the reason why the bottom crosses were so crooked. Now we're into straightening the cross strings, and I'm not going to even bother doing the top half because that's the ones that I was holding in place while I was applying tension. So you can see that they're straight. So I am going to straighten out the bottom half. Now, one thing I see in common with a lot of stringers is that they'll use a pulling technique whenever they're using the setting off awl. So I'll demonstrate a couple of ways. And you always want to lock the turntable, so I'm going to do that first. But you can see that the racket is positioned in a way that I'm at 12 o'clock. So I'm going to lock the turntable here. And when you're using the setting off awl, you're basically pulling the string by bringing those strings so that they're perpendicular to each other. And you can start from either side, doesn't matter, but you're just going across the string trying to get it so that it's again in a straight line that way. So that's the pulling technique from 12 o'clock, and that's good for a right-hander or a left-hander. I prefer to actually position my racket at 3 o'clock. So you can see that the racket's here. I'm going to place the racket so that it's at 3 o'clock. And this works for a right-hander, not a left-hander. So I'm going to go ahead and do it how I would typically use this pulling technique. And it's just a different viewpoint. I mean, I'm still looking at the string. But what I like to look at is the string that I'm straightening. I like to see it in a straight line going away from me. So basically, I'm doing the same thing. I'm still pulling it, but I'm just doing it in a different direction. So you can see that I'm just going back and forth until the string is in a straight line. This is one of the things that will catch people's eyes is when you're finished stringing the racket. when you're doing this to the racket, they'll be wondering, what are you doing to the racket? I mean, it looks like you're stabbing the strings, but even if you, I mean, you can see that even if I'm trying to stab the string, because of the blunt tip, it's not going to harm the strings. But it's just funny when people see you doing this. So that's the pulling technique when straightening your strings. And the reason why this works for a right-hander is because I'm pulling it this way. So if I was left-handed, it wouldn't work because I would have to push the strings, push it away. And I forgot to mention, but typically when you straighten strings, it's always gonna go in a smiley face away from in the direction that you're weaving, because of the fact that the strings that are tension is gonna cause the strings to move away. So you always want to position the racket where you can pull the strings versus pushing it. So now the cross strings are straightened, but I like to do the final touches by hand. So what I'll do is I'll remove the racket from the machine and I'll just look at it one more time just to make sure everything is in a straight line perpendicular to each other. And if it's good, then I'll hand it to the customer. So remember, when installing your cross strings, by keeping them straight during stringing is essential to reduce string straightening after stringing. Thanks for watching, happy stringing, and let your strings play.